Shrine's Legacy. This will stand as the second demo I've ever covered on this show, as well as the first PC game. And I feel I need to preface that. See, I don't have the most experience with PC gaming. I started PC gaming back in the early 90s on MS-DOS, and as I saw from firsthand, when you type something slightly wrong into the command line, your computer can physically destroy itself. It happened to my uncle. I actually saw it happen, and that was part of the reason why I was so terrified of PC gaming. That, and I mean, back then, to PC game, you had to have a mouse, a keyboard, and a joystick. You needed to basically be an octopus to play things. But, like, just so you know, my experience with PC gaming is so inept that if you pointed at a keyboard and asked me what keys moved your character, I would point to the directional arrows and not with SAD. I still don't understand how people use those keys to move anything. I don't know how you PC people do it! It's a mystery I'll never understand, but I hope to eventually. Nowadays, you can actually hook up a controller to PC gaming, so I have been trying for a while to record some stuff. But, well, most of the stuff I want to record is the PC games I grew up with, which is all MS-DOS, and DOSBox does not like OBS so much. I'm still trying to work on that. So if this looks bad or terrible or janky, just know I am right now, first time ever actually recording PC footage. Like, ever. Like, I know I might be the worst, as I've seen numerous comments lately tell me, seriously, you comment people are mean. I'm gonna go live journal my sadness away, or whatever the kids do. I am so old. But either way, my point is, I'm not experienced with PC gaming, like, at all. And this is my first attempt, because the creative director of this game kind of contacted me, and they said that they had seen a few of my videos, and they noticed that some of the games I liked were kind of like the ones that inspired this game, and this game would totally be down my alley. And because of that, I was genuinely interested to give this game a shot. And coming away from it, and, you know, bear in mind this is a demo of a beta, but still, you know, coming away from it, this was a ridiculously well-polished product, and I was really impressed with it. It's not perfect, but I can also count on one hand the total number of games I consider perfect, so you know. The story follows Ryo Shrine of the titular legacy, as well as his deuteragonist partner, Rayma. They are on a quest to stop the evil Aklor, the evil knight guy from the opening, which, just slight tangent, tasty sprite art. Very, very nice. I'm very impressed. Together they are trying to travel around the world, gathering elemental crystals to ultimately power themselves up so that they can stop his reign of terror, whereas Aklor himself is basically just trying to swipe Ryo's sword, which is like the only thing that can stop him. The characters themselves are actually quite interesting, and there's a fair bit of development with them just from this 2-hour demo. For one thing, Ryo and Rayma, they're not exactly on the best of terms. They're not like your typical team of, you know, best friends from birth or whatever. Their relationship starts with Rayma trying to steal his sword because she's trying to stop Aklor himself, whereas he is trying to ultimately train to be a knight to ultimately defeat him when he comes back, not realizing he's already here. And when this information is dropped on him, he does the hero's journey thing of turning down the call of duty to try and save his village. He has his own priorities that are not simply to be the good guy who does the good things and saves the world because goodness. No, he's there because he has his own interests and ultimately he has his own focus. It's not until it's pointed out that, hey, your village and by extension your love interest are always going to be in trouble unless we stop this problem and you step up. And conversely, Rayma has her own backstory and her own motivations. They are not in it because they are the best of friends, and it's a very, very thin alliance to start out with. But it does develop as time goes on, and we do learn a little bit more about these characters as we go. Moreover, we learn a little bit more about Aklor as time goes on as well. We learn that he's not necessarily so much afraid of the legendary knight that's coming to get him, so much as he thinks he's basically a speck of dust with a shiny sword that could kill him, which is interesting. And I do have to appreciate any villain that's willing to basically head out on the front lines with his men. That's very, very cool. I do like the characters here. I think that what little story we get is very well told, it's well written, and it shows a greater depth to these characters that I hope gets expanded on in the future. And there's a fair bit of world building out there as well. In this demo, you get to visit 3 or 4 different environments, a tropical island, a lush forest, as well as a sea town, and they all feel visually distinct from one another, and they all feel like they have their own sort of ecosystem and culture to go along with them. The fishing town is significantly different from the farming village you start in, and I have to appreciate that it seems like a lot of the NPCs have their own lives and stories going on with them as well. This game has a lot of effort put into its world building, and as someone who's getting into the Nihon Falcom Trails of Cold Steel games, I'm someone who really appreciates that. The gameplay here feels relatively well polished. There was one or two things that kind of stood out to me that I didn't care for, but ultimately felt really well done. It is at its core an action RPG, and like I said, it takes its roots in the developer's favorite games of old, which coincidentally happen to be a lot like my favorite games of old, specifically the quartet of RPGs Quintet put out: Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, Terranigma, and Grand Stream Saga, with a little bit of Secret of Mana thrown in for good measure, which I love anything that puts Secret of Mana in there. Also a smidge of Ruin Arm, but again, that might just be because this game is in beta and you don't want to be compared to Ruin Arm, and it was really only one instance. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it even features some things from those games. For one thing, the ability to destroy barriers by killing everything in the room produces a similar animation to Illusion of Gaia. And anyone who's played Terranigma is gonna know the whole faceplant into enemies attack. It's here, and it's still the most effective thing in the game. And when I saw it, I had the biggest grin on my face. But ultimately, this is an action RPG with sort of an asymmetrical multiplayer element involved. I don't normally talk about multiplayer, but it is incorporated into the single player, so I'll bring it up, I guess. You have your two characters. Ryo is more the fighter. He's equipped with his magical, legendary, sparkly Sword of Justice, which swings in a nice fancy arc. Reima, however, is equipped with a pokey pokey stick, which has a significantly smaller feeling hitbox, which makes me feel like she's designed more to be the mage, and to be fair, from a plot standpoint, she absolutely is. Now the problem is that you would think that that would then mean that Ryo is designed to basically be the fighter, whereas Reima is to hang out behind and spam magic. And that makes sense, at least if you look at their stats. She does seem to have an inclination towards magic, whereas Ryo is more physical. And it would further be hinted by their hitboxes. But the fact is, I didn't play a lot as Reima just because I didn't see a point. I did play as her for a little bit just to see, you know, does she have extra magic? Is her magic, like, significantly different? And it really isn't. Ultimately, it feels like she's an extension of a health bar, and if you are playing with someone else, or indeed swap to her, it feels like you're just at a slight disadvantage because you don't have that wide swinging arc that the sword possesses, which is a little unfortunate. Since we're talking about it, let's talk about magic. Magic is centered around the 8 magic chaos emeralds of yore, each one with a different color, and as you swap to them, they'll change your magic. In this game, there's 3, although the game ends when you get the 3rd one, so you only get to see 2. The first one being a ice ability. It lets you freeze enemies slightly in front of you, which is useful for puzzles. The first dungeon incorporates a lot of slidey block puzzles that really do utilize this well, and then the second one, being a red gem, allows you to light stuff on fire. Again, kinda useful. However, this is where I had a little bit of an issue with magic, and that is that the two felt very, from a combat standpoint, pretty much identical. With the exception of their color, the two felt very, very similar if you wanted to use them in combat. Now, I ultimately didn't need to use them in combat too much because, again, I had my faceplant into enemy strategy that just worked about as well as it did in Terranigma, but it just felt like the two kind of were a little lukewarm. They were a side grade and not effectively significantly different to handle a different combat scenario. Now, that is inherently kind of disappointing, but I immediately stopped being disappointed by the end when you get the 3rd magic chaos emerald, which gives you the light magic, which gives you magic armor. Now again, the game ends when you get it, so you don't actually get to test it out, but it had a really neat effect. When you apply it, any amount of damage you take gets returned to you as health, which is a pretty unique concept. I've only ever seen one other game do that, which was the Konosuba Mega Man style fan game, and that alone gives me hope for the magic system. Yeah, the 2 you get here are a little lukewarm for combat and really are more useful for puzzles anyway, but the fact that the 3rd one has such creative applications, and I can see that being used for a couple different dungeon designs, such as creating traps around trying to, like, withstand a trap for a certain period of time until it breaks or something. You know, there are options there. It should also be noted that your characters can, in sort of like a Mega Man vein, swap between their different elements with the triggers. At least if you're like me and you're playing with a controller. I'm not sure what you PC Master Race people do with the keyboard. I assume it involves some sort of unholy blood sacrifice to the command line, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But the fact that you can swap between magics on the fly is great. It leads to less menuing and more actual game time. And of course, this does lead me to think that they might be incorporating plans to utilize complex combinations of magic in the future for more complex puzzle design. I didn't see a lot of use in combining magics, however, and I hope that that's rectified in the future, but again, this is the very first chunk of the game. They haven't gotten to the point where you're mixing magics and stuff, but I hope eventually they do get to that point, because the magic system, while initially seems a little disappointing, once I saw that third one, they've got some ideas, and I hope they really do execute with the more creative magic in the future, and really learn to mix them together for more intense puzzle action. Because the puzzles in this game, they're okay, but they're not terribly difficult. I ultimately got stuck on one puzzle, and here's where the ruin arms section comes in, because my partner happened to be physically in the way, blocking where I wanted to shove a block. Thank you, ruin arm, you obscure RPG no one ever played because your co-op was awful. But the puzzles themselves were alright. What really impressed me was the puzzle involving the first boss, where you had to utilize your magic to actually damage the enemy. That was really cool, and I hope that bosses take a bit more of a turn in that direction too, because this demo features 3, and after the first one they were kind of a little bit of a downgrade, because I ended up just face tanking the other 2, because there wasn't really a lot of strategy to them, and the game itself isn't terribly difficult, although that might just be for accessibility in the demo. The map design to this game is decent, although it does feel somewhat linear. I took a look at the press kit this game mentioned, and they did say that they were planning on adding like bigger, more complex areas to explore later on, which is good, although I did find like the first 2 dungeons to be just a little too linear for my taste, although they did have some fun secret areas, including one secret that I think is tied to something else that isn't even in the game yet, and I absolutely need to know what it was about because it's gonna drive me crazy. But that said, the environments are decent, and the second dungeon, while it's still fairly linear, it adds a little bit more complex puzzles, as well as having slightly bigger, more open areas, which was a breath of fresh air. Totally great. And in between those, you've got side quests, collectibles, and minigames, and they all seem really well done. Finding the goats was a lot of fun. Trying to catch fish, that took a few attempts, but it was fun. And fighting dummies because you get training dummy telepathy later on, that was fun too, that was good. It was good times. Now, because this game is a beta, and I am absolutely that guy, I did try and break it about as many different ways as I possibly can, and I am pleased to tell you, I couldn't do it. This game has remarkable bug testing, and it's quite impressive. In fact, when I tried to go out of bounds in a few different areas, I was actually rewarded. They actually put secrets there, and when I thought I finally did break a map, I actually was given a mini game. So, they thought of me. This beta was definitely designed with exploration in mind, and as someone who likes exploration a lot in his video games, that's definitely appreciated. That said, while I couldn't break the game per se, there was 2 things I noticed that didn't feel like they were intentional, and they were both associated with the first dungeon, the forest. First, this door doesn't look like it actually blocks your way, which has a barrier for physical impediment to actually, clear the space. That's not good. I don't know if this is just like a tile set thing or something, but this door does not actually, door properly, which is a bit of a problem. But the other thing was that in that dungeon, there is a puzzle where you have to use magic to basically turn an object to ice, slide the ice around, and then kill something at a distance because it's surrounded by a hazard. Except that I accidentally pushed the ice block into a different area, and I didn't want to reset the room, so I just hit the target with my magic's extended reach. And that worked. And I don't think that was intentional. Couldn't break the game, but I did find some things that probably should be tweaked. This game also features a sort of Paper Mario or Bug Fables style badge system where you can collect different badges and then depending on how many badge points your characters have, equip them, which augment your stats slightly. Now in the demo itself, I did get a couple of badges and I did see a bunch in shops, but I didn't see too many that really felt game-changing, I'm hoping that down the line, towards the finished product of the game, they include more and more interesting combinations that allow you to specialize your characters because each character can equip a different set of badges, as well as create interesting character combinations, class combinations, and just teamwork dynamic by utilizing different types of badges in certain situations. Sort of like how crazy you could get in Bug Fables with the instant poison badge. Seriously, if you're playing Bug Fable still, good on ya. Equipped an instant poison badge, you can do some really mean things when you're poisoned in that game. But my point is that this game utilized its badge system okay. It wasn't fantastic, but again, it's early game. There could be some fantastic stuff planned down the line. I don't know, I can only talk about what I experienced here. The system itself was fine. It wasn't stand out, but you know, it's nice to see collectibles that augment your stats that you have to go and look out for and, you know, buy. And you get them from a guy named Gem the Jeweler. Come on! Illusion of Gaia! Go play it. It's awesome. And then watch my review, because it's awesome. And then the other 3 games in this series that, you know, no one talks about the 4th one. It was also good, damn it. This game also features a very light crafting system, and it's not one that's really shoved in your face, which, as someone who doesn't care too much for crafting systems, I appreciate. I always see crafting as a way to artificially extend the length of a game by forcing people to grind to get specific things to make better stuff. No, in this game, you kill stuff, you get some things, you can build a health potion. You can also get like permanent stat increase stuff, but those are only given out through treasure chests and through boss kills, which means you can't really grind for it. You can explore and be rewarded for it, but grinding will never lead to a significantly better character. Well, outside of like leveling and experience. I appreciate that the crafting isn't really thrown in your face like that. That definitely appeals to me. The demo to Shrine's Legacy is about 2 hours worth of content. I spent about 3, but I also spent a lot of that recording audio because the soundtrack to this game is great. And, you know, for 2 hours, that's a lot of content. There's a total of 8 different elemental stones that give you a different elemental magic, and through the course of the game, you get 3, which, I mean, math will tell you that that's basically a third of the game right there, supposedly. That's not an insignificant sum for a free demo. This is a great way to spend 2 hours of your time at no cost, and it's a fun RPG. I definitely appreciate this game from a gameplay perspective. It's not perfect, but again, it's beta, but I definitely see a lot of passion and effort and testing to make something of really high quality here, and gameplay-wise, I think it shows pretty well. Presentation-wise, this game is pretty great as well, although it does have some hiccups. If you're like me, looking at the human characters in this game, you're probably gonna immediately think you're playing Stardew Valley. That could be a good or a bad thing. Stardew Valley did have some great sprites, but that means the people in this game might not have as much of a visual identity and might get easily compared to it, hence my whole point. But they are still good, and the monster designs are tremendous, sometimes. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so we've got this frog enemy, and I'm absolutely cherry picking because this frog enemy is probably the coolest enemy in the game, I think. It is really well animated. It is really just a beautiful enemy, really. It's really creative. I love it. It looks like an amazing, really high quality professional product. And then you've got enemies like this, and this, and this, that feel like they have no place being in a game with something as cool as this frog. Now, again, I'm going to chalk this up to beta being beta, and I hope those are just unfinished sprites because they do look a little untextured, but it really does feel like they kind of swing wildly from the quality spectrum on this one. So I might suggest that you tweak at least 2 of those, but the wonky, derpy looking crab thing, you keep that the way it is. That is a mascot in the making. Also, this frog guy. I love this frog guy. He's just awesome. I also want to talk about the main villain Aklor here for a moment. If you look at his individual face sprites, and the face sprites in this game are really well done as well, and you know, the opening screen work, which looks fantastic, his character sprite doesn't really feel like it hits quite the same level of quality with it. I'm not sure how to put this into words terribly eloquently, but it looks like they took like a significantly bigger sprite and just sort of smushed him down. He just looks like he's a little too busy in too small a space. I think they either need to make him bigger and space him out a little bit more, or slim him down and make him smaller. Overall, his character sprite doesn't feel like it matches up quite with his portrait. If I had one other criticism about this game visually, it doesn't have a swimming sprite, and it kind of needs one because the characters just sort of bob up and down in sort of like a standing motion when they're swimming, and you don't go swimming often in this game, but it did look a little bit peculiar and not quite right. Going to various towns, they all feel unique, and they're all filled with their own unique races. There are some like animal, beast, human hybrid type creatures, as well as postman cats. This game wins just because it has postman cats. Postman cats are awesome. Also, this game features a trio of brothers who are bounty hunters, who are luchadors, and they are some of the coolest characters in this demo. Seriously, this world has such an interesting cast of characters, and I really hope they lean more into the fantastical elements of it in the future, because they really do have something here. And audio-wise, it's tremendous. The soundtrack to this game is amazing. The first 15 minutes I spent playing this game, not gonna lie, 10 minutes of that was just recording audio to use for this video. It was so good. The only thing I have against the soundtrack in this game is that it is a looping soundtrack, and it does have some very noticeable points where it does loop. So if you're listening to it over and over in a big area because you haven't transitioned or you're standing around recording it like I did, it might wear on you a little bit, but the songs themselves are tremendous. Overall, the presentation is great. It has some rough spots that, again, I think can be attributed to the fact it's beta, but when this game shines, it absolutely shines. Overall, would I recommend Shrine's Legacy? Well, it's free, and I'm going to put a link to its website there so you can download it yourself, because, I mean, it's a free game you can play for 2 hours. You get some awesome music, you get a fun adventure, you get some really well-created characters, some excellent world design, a little bit of jank here and there, but again, it's beta, as well as just a fun story in a creative world to explore. You know, pretty much every complaint I have with this game at this point is just the fact that it is an unfinished beta, really. This feels like a genuinely impressive piece of quality work, and if the final result of the full game is as polished as this demo was, or at least as highly polished as this demo could get, I think this game could be something truly special. And I'm not just saying that because it's something that is very clearly trying to be a lot like games that I'm very nostalgic for. I mean, that is true, but ultimately this game stands on its own as being a really fun experience, even in a beta demo. So yeah, I would recommend this game. This game is awesome. This is a game that is clearly put together by basically 2 very passionate individuals, and as someone who's trying to turn his passion to a career himself, that resonates with me on a very profound level. This game starts on a very, very powerful quote. Don't give up, especially on who you are. And I think for people who are following their passion, both the developers who made this game and me doing this, that too extends to our work. Be true to yourself and do what you think is right, and stand by your work as much as you can. You know, that speaks volumes. That was very, very powerful to me. This game is clearly the work of a lot of passion, and I really hope I have effectively shown this off enough to you to make you want to play it, because this game is pretty tremendous. I read that quote on a day that was pretty hard for me, and you know what? It helped a lot. Playing this game was a very special moment for me, and it helped me feel a lot better on a day that I was just feeling like absolute garbage on. Shrine's Legacy is a well put together demo that I hope turns into a proper full game in the near future, and I hope it has the same level of quality that I've seen in this demo, because this is going to be something truly special. I very, very deeply believe that from my core. I had a lot of fun with this demo, and if you want a fun 2-hour romp in a really solid action RPG, I suggest you check this one out because, like I said, I think it's pretty special.